and get to my presentation. Can you see the slides?
We can.
Yes, we can. Thanks. Great.
And is it in the correct presentation mode? Yeah. Okay, thank you. So I'm here on behalf of the CHE, and I want to really talk to two specific projects that relate to this. Oh no, no, I'm not going. So I just quickly want to talk about the CHE's role, and then the new quality assurance framework, and then really focus on the higher education practice standard. And I really want to focus on the one for modes of provision, which is most closely related to digital education, and then talk quickly about the themed review on modes of provision. And then just at the end, I just want to talk about the project that we are involved in on the potential of micro-credentials in South Africa. So just briefly, the CHE, if you don't know, is an independent statutory body, statutory meaning that we are mandated by two acts of parliament. The one is the Higher Education Act, and the other one is the NQF Act. And we are the sole quality council for South Africa. Most people know us for our role in quality assurance through the various activities that we do there. And then another role which has sort of fallen a little bit by the wayside, but which we are really trying to rebuild and make more prominent again, is around research and scholarship in higher education. And then a recent addition to our mandate is that the minister has asked us to oversee transformation in higher education and of higher education. And that's just starting for us to do that. But if you know the work of the CHE, transformation has always been part of the work of the CHE and the HEQC. And in the 2001 founding document of the HEQC, it even says that quality cannot happen without transformation, and transformation cannot happen without quality as well. Then I just really want to speak specifically to standards in the new quality assurance framework. The quality assurance framework was approved in 2020, and we're starting to implement it now this year. It was launched in 2023, and we're starting to implement it now in 2024. So one of the most important principles in the new QAF, which has always been there because it is actually in the Higher Education Act, is that higher education institutions are responsible for their own internal quality assurance. And we're just re-emphasizing that. So we are developing standards, new standards to assist with this development of the internal quality assurance of institutions. But then the standards will also form the basis for capacity development. And the idea is really to focus in the first iteration of the QAF on learning, teaching, and assessment. Then the standards will also form the basis for the various quality reviews. Becky, maybe if you can mute yourself, please.
Sorry. Yeah.
The idea is that we have one set of standards that will be used for all of our activities, for capacity development, for accreditation, and for institutional reviews. The public universities have just gone through the institutional audits, but there will be more going forward. And one of them will be a themed review specifically on modes of provision. So the idea is really that the standards are also transformative in nature. In other words, that they change the way we work and are sort of forward-looking, if you like, rather than describing a minimum benchmark or a current status quo. The standards must also differentiate between institutions, where they are on their different missions and visions and so on. And the idea is also that standards are embedded in research and good practice. So this is the QAF in a nutshell. You will see that standards really are at the center, and will hold everything together. And then accreditation and quality reviews will be based on the standards. The integrating themes will be learning and teaching and transformation in that first iteration. And then we will have as integrating structures, communities of practice, and then a management information system, which we are currently building. It doesn't directly speak to digital education, but it does speak to the fact that the CHE is going into a whole new era of digital transformation, where we will be looking at how to improve and get better information management going from the CHE side. And then the integrating functions will be the capacity development and quality promotion. Then it's just important to know that these standards will be very foundational. So we're going to, the functions are the development of the standards and then using them for capacity development, accreditation, and quality reviews. So the idea is one overall set of standards that we use for everything. So the standards really are an integrating mechanism, and the idea is to create this integrated and simplified. Prof. Peterson, maybe you want to turn off your camera as well. An integrated and simplified QA ecosystem. Standards are really codes of practice then, and much broader than minimum criteria. And it's meant to assist quality assurance activities in their provision. So there will be two types of standards for external quality assurance. That is what the CHE does, and internal quality assurance is what you as an institution do. The first one will be the higher education practice standards, where we've divided higher education in a whole number of areas and developed standards for them. And I will talk to one example of that. And then we will look at the other standard or qualification standards. So the process really is to go through a process of reflexive and generative methodology through expert-driven communities of practice. I'm keeping my eye on the time, so I'll really have to rush through this, but you will get the presentation afterwards, I'm assuming. So I'm not going to go through everything. We start off with a broad stakeholder consultation, which took place on those dates. It's a workshop setting where people really give input, which then is an input to the community of practice to work on the standards. And then these four transformational themes really cross-cut all of the standards to achieve a sustainable, equitable society, and the role specifically of higher education in that. Higher education as sites of personal, cultural, societal change and transformation. Authentic leadership and management around, specifically in support of the academic project. And then agency, identity, and the relationality of staff and students to each other. So these are the areas that we've developed for the standards. So there will be a standard on each one of these areas. The green ones, we've already got drafts. The brown ones, we're currently busy preparing. And then the one I want to focus on today is number 8, the modes of learning and teaching provision. I'm not going to go into these definitions, but basically the standards are there as the basic sort of a standard statement as a code of good practice. Then the guidelines really will be what leads you to continuous development and continuous improvement. They're open-ended and they support innovation in terms of reflexive questions. And then the criteria will be used to make quality judgment, and they will be for specific kinds of reviews or for accreditation for new qualifications or reviewing existing qualifications. The idea is to develop them through different lenses with many units of analysis, have them as being very flexible in their application to enable institutional differentiation, but also to enable an authentic process of reflection on the one hand, but have that minimum accountability that the CHE is still responsible for, even as we encourage reflexivity and continuous improvement. So the example I really wanted to put to you today is that it's still a draft and there will be consultation. This is the standard statement for modes of learning and teaching provision as it currently is. I'll leave you to read it for a second or so. So this is the overall standard statement for modes of learning and teaching provision. And then the guidelines are in the form of reflexive questions. And the idea is really that these are future looking and that they are for continuous improvement. For example, in 5, in what ways are lecturers supported to design online environments reflective of learning activities and to contribute to the authenticity of the learning experience? And for example, number 8, in what ways do these pedagogical practices enable purposeful actions in learning? And the whole idea is really to start with the pedagogy and then go to the environment. And number 9, in what ways are the lecturers trained and supported to do all of these things? So these are some of the open-ended questions. And then the draft criteria you will see is then what enables quality judgment to make. For example, around strategy, around policies and procedures, about the physical and digital infrastructure and resource allocation, around the digital literacy of staff, the digital literacy of students, the digital pedagogic competence of staff, and then 7 and 8 is around the ethics, mostly in the first one for students, in the second one for lecturers and for the institution. And then criterion 9 is just a request for record keeping. So that's as far as the standard for modes of provision goes. Then I'll just quickly talk to the potential of micro-credentials for Southern Africa. It's really a collaborative project with a huge consortium of African and European universities, councils, and so on, and it's supported by a grant from the EU. Those are some of the partners that are involved in this. The idea is really to look at how we can promote and harness the potential through micro-credentials, looking specifically at innovation, mobility, and economic growth, but also looking specifically at policy development throughout Southern Africa, good practice, and to look at how we can really harness the potential of micro-credentials. So these are the 2 projects that I wanted to share with you for today. I hope I tried to keep to time, and there will be questions at the end if I understand correctly.
Yes. No, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Britta. Are there any questions? It looks like the whole digital transformation or digital education has got several dimensions, which CHE is managing to sort of like approach. You have talked about platforms, you have talked about, innovation in terms of pedagogical methodologies, you have talked about digital literacy and digital skills, which are also important, and you've also touched on teaching administration purposes, infrastructure as well. We've touched on that as well, which shows that there are quite a number of dimensions. I'm sure even the other speakers will highlight other sort of like dimensions as well. So any questions? I see there's a hand from Adesua. You can go ahead.
Yes, please. Thank you for the opportunity. Britta, thanks a lot for your presentation. Very rich and so much to learn. In a short space of time, I struggled to really catch up, even when I had rapt attention. I missed your slide on the criterion. Can you please help me? Just share it again where you had criterion 1, 2, 4. I plead with you. I'm not sure I would receive the PowerPoint, so I really want to capture everything. Please.
Is that the slide, Adesua?
Yes, yes, please. That's the slide I'm looking for.
Okay, you can go ahead.
And then the second one was this, okay?
I did. I got the second. It's the first I didn't. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Then there is another question, a hand, in fact, William Modiba. Go ahead. Go ahead, William, you're muted. You're muted, William. Okay, that's better.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Good morning. Sorry about that. Thanks, Britta, for this wonderful presentation. I'm also going to be honing on the slide. You spoke about POMISA, and I just got interested in what it's all about. So if you can maybe share the website where we can go and read whilst we're going to wait for the Q&A session. Thanks.
Okay, I will do that. I'll drop in. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Looks like there's none. Thanks once again, Britta. Obviously, Britta did say that she's gonna share the presentation to the attendants, so then we can take it from there. So do we go to the next speaker? Is it Tebogo Tsebe?
Yes, it's Tebogo here.
Oh, Tebogo, thank you very much. Take us through.
I just want to check if Tebogo managed to connect. He was having connection problems.
She's just
Is Tebogo in the room?
Yeah, she is.
He is.
Yeah, I heard a voice. Tebogo?
Yes, I'm here, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. You can go ahead, take us through.
Thank you, Chair. Greetings, colleagues. Let me see if I can project on my side. I hope colleagues can see on their side.
Yes, we can, Tebogo.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, greetings. Tebo is my name. I am from USAF. I'm responsible for student success portfolio. And I'm also involved with some of the project that has to do with digital transformation within Helm. There is a project that we are currently running that is called ULEFU, which is University Learning Futures. So that's what I will be sharing about on this particular project. And as I've said, I'm from USAF, and I'm sure that many of you are familiar with it. But for those who might not be familiar with the work that we do, mainly we work with all the 26 universities, and our main role is basically to support them in having sustainable and responsive universities. And you will know that our board of directors are the vice chancellors of the different institutes. And some of those board members, they form part of our executive committee, which also lead the governance of the institute. But the main work, if I were to say, I think it actually takes place through what we call our strategic groups. These are actually the groups that are made up of experts in the field. They are led by the different vice chancellors. Their main role, among others, is actually to support the ESCO in terms of the functions of the board, but also there are the committee that make presentation to the board in terms of the reports, and they play a very critical role in terms of implementation of the activities of the board. And I'm sharing this because the division or the unit that I'm representing actually is accountable to these strategic groups, particularly the last two, which is Teaching and Learning Strategy Group, and the Leadership and Management Strategy Group. This is where our director, Dr. Oliver Seal, make presentation reports on the activities that we do and the progress that we do. So I come from Helm, as I've said, and you will be familiar with ADI, but I think these are the main two flagship programs within USAF. You can also see them as more like your divisions. They've got directorates, each of them, which lead them. And I'm within the role, mainly it's more on leadership development and supporting institute in terms of capacity development, doing different programs that advance the work that they do. And the project that I'm presenting in particular, which is called ULEFU, University Learning Futures. This project is actually aimed at supporting historically disadvantaged institutes, and the project was initiated in 2021. And I mean, the main reason, if you will remember during that time, obviously COVID was the main focus. And this project was actually initiated because of the effect that COVID-19 had on this particular institutes. If I remember at that time, majority of them, they had, I mean, little to even some had, I mean, in terms of infrastructure, they had, limited infrastructure. There was no capacity in terms of being able to implement technology-mediated learning and teaching. And this project was actually then initiated, or actually the request to get funding from AMT was based on these particular issues that were faced by this institute. It is funded by the Oppenheimer Memorial Trust. And just to give you a bit of a background of where these institutes were, I provided this slide. This slide basically, I draw the data from one of the minister's briefing that happened around 2020. I think it was around September. This was when the minister, if you remember at that time, he was providing regular updates about the P sector in terms of response to COVID-19. And what you are seeing there is that at that time, only 10 out of the 26 institutes were or had planned to complete the academic year by the end of 2020. And the rest of the institutes, they actually had planned to complete it the following year. But what I wanted you to note on this particular slide is that the institute that we are supporting were among those who were actually not able to complete the year. And if I were to zoom on that, what you will see on this slide is that out of all the 26 institutes, and this was actually later around November, when the minister provided an update, what we learned at that time is that out of the 26, there were 9 institutes that were not ready to complete the academic year, and they had updated their status in terms of progress. And what we noted from that report was that 4 of the institutes that are categorized as historically disadvantaged only had plans to complete by March 2021, and 3 of them had planned to complete by February 2021. And it was only UWC, which is among the 8 institutes that actually had plans to complete by December 2020. These colleagues, I think, just maybe wanted to just, put a picture of the status that we're at with these 8 institutes that fall under the HDIs and why there was a priority to provide support to them. And in terms of now the implementation of the program, so how the program was unfolded is that it started with the consultation of the DVCs of teaching and learning across all the institutes. And mainly, we wanted to gain understanding, and I'm saying we loosely there. At that time, I was not yet part of USAF, but the colleagues who were available within USAF at that time, they engaged with the DVC just to gain understanding of the status of their institute, the progress they have made with regard to response to COVID-19, but also the challenges that they had at that particular time. But follow up to this, the team that was working on this particular project, they also requested key document and strategic document that could be able to triangulate what we are getting from the DVC, but also to see what is on paper in terms of response to COVID-19. And what you are seeing now in terms of the graph that we are seeing in front of you, the table, it's actually more like a monitoring tool that we used in order to gauge the status of where these institutes were. And you will note that the red crosses actually are institutes that did not have those particular referred documents or information that was required. But also to put a caveat, some of the crosses were there because we did not have documents to collaborate what we got from the DVC. So we only put information that could be substantiated or supported by documents that we have. And what we noted from the status at that time was that, I mean, you will see, particularly if you look at number 2, digital teaching and learning practice zone, we were looking there at whether this institute had got some toolkits that can be used by students and also toolkits that can be used by staff. And we noticed that majority of them did not have toolkits to guide students on how to navigate online teaching. But also what we noted at that time was that if you look at 2.2, for example, that although there was some form of capacity development that was taking place within this institute, it was very limited due to capacity issues. They did not have people to train or enough capacity to develop and train their staff on how to undertake this particular development, but also to be able to cater for the need at the time. And lastly, looking at number 2, we also realize, I mean, majority, if not all this institute at that time, they lack instructional designers, which means there was a challenge in order to develop online courses, which put them at a disadvantage state at the time. But the bigger issue that I think we hinged on was the issue of the ICT resource and infrastructure. You remember, I think UFs at that time also did a survey under DHED and looking at connectivity and all of that. And what we noticed at that time was that although most of the institute or some of them had the learning management system, this was more like a repository. So they were just putting information there, but it was not effectively used across the institute. Basically, what I mean by that is that an institute can have different campuses. Only one might be actively using it, but you'll find others are not using that particular system, or the system exists, but it's not effectively being used for online teaching and learning. And the other thing that we noticed, which I think was also a big issue, there were no student tracking and monitoring system, which means, you know, we were not even equipped enough to be able to track and monitor the progress of the student. And lastly, one area that I thought is still a big issue, but what it was a huge issue at that time was an integration of the system. Most of these institutes, they had systems, but most of them were not integrated. And I will touch on the last part, number 4, later, when I relook at the progress thus far. But in essence, this was the picture that we had at that time that also necessitated that we provide support. And in terms of the execution now, given what we got from the DVCs and what we got from the documents that we received from the Institute, and also the plans that we have in terms of this particular project, our main focus was obviously continuous engagement with the Institute to see if there's any progress, but also to provide sector support. And what we did at that time was to conduct workshops across the sector where we required all this institute to provide key people within the institute who can be trained on digital transformation, mediated teaching and learning using technology, and some of the principles that they can apply in order to help at the institute. But also we started to think about developing content. And when I speak about content, I will share about that later. It's in terms of what documents can we put the knowledge, information that we can put on the system that can be accessed. That is something that we're still working on at this point. But also during the presentation and the workshop, we leverage the experts' knowledge in the field, who are the people in the field also working in this area, who can come and present and share knowledge with colleagues across the HDIs and provide assistance. And what we did during that time, and currently we are still doing, we train overall 105 staff members across all the 8 institutes. And I did not provide the data, but basically the people who were trained, it ranges from, directors of ICT, senior managers within ICT system or infrastructure resource within institute, but also academics within the field who can be able to also become trainers within their own institute. So we requested DVCs of different institutes to provide us with people whom we can train in terms of capacitating them, but also developing what we call the training the trainer systems within the institute, so people can be able to develop and train others based on the principle that we share. And if I were to give just an example of some of the topics that we covered during those presentations, and this was done through the leadership of also our colleagues at UWC, who were a bit advanced compared to other institutes who provided this particular training. So the way we operate, we contract experts in the field who provide training and support to these institutes. And some of the topics that were covered at that time was basically to look at digital transformation, how to develop their own plans in terms of DX. And obviously, I'm sharing this just as an example, but this was actually practical workshops where they were given templates, they were given documents, and they were guided on how to develop this, because the whole idea was that by the time they finish with the program, they need to go back with their institute through the leadership of the DVC and be able to implement this knowledge that was shared. But later, I think it was around late last year, if not mid last year, we also re-looked into the data again. And what we noticed, particularly if you look at number 2 as well, which we looked at previously, you will see that there's been a lot of adjustment. There've been a lot of changes in terms of capacity development. The majority of these institutes, they actually confirm that they've done a lot of training internally where people were capacitated, but also leveraging some of the people within the institute who can be able to assist with capacity development, which is what is actually happening across the sector, where other institutes might not have the resources. For example, you find in UKZN, for example, if I were to take that, they will use maybe a professor in engineering to develop a learning management system or to develop a system that they can use internally. So not only looking at the capacity within the ICT department or within the e-learning department, because most of this institute, what we realize that, I mean, the situation was dire in a sense that you find there's only one person in e-learning, for example. So obviously to cater for the entire institute with one person, it was so difficult to make any. There's been a lot of progress, as you can see there, in terms of capacity development, developing tools and all that. But I think the area that we are also happy is that you look in terms of the ICT infrastructure, that institute that started to dedicate to the development of their e-learning unit, where there has been progress in terms of the use of the management system. Obviously, the area that I think for us is still a concern is the integration of the system. And I think mainly we notice as well that because of the frustration that this institute has, majority of them, when we reverted to level 1, or when we were taken to level 1, they actually reverted to the pre-COVID status. They started to go back to the way they used to do things. And this system might not have been developed further. So that's the area that we are going to be focusing on. And also, if you look at number 4, there's not been much progress in that area, which is an area that we want to focus on, where institute can start to focus on developing strategies and policies around digital transformation. I think it has started not only the HDIs, but across the sector, but also to look at the support from the executive. I mean, one of the concerns that we noted was that in this institute as well, I mean, I think there's been change of DVCs, which are our key people that we work with, and we wanted continuation of this project. I think 3, if not 4 of them have changed the DVC for teaching and learning. And those were just a concern that we noted that also hinder in terms of continuity of this particular project. But in terms of the way forward, what is currently happening, obviously, we are looking at on how to support the institute in terms of the policy gaps that we have noted. There's not much we can do from an infrastructure issues, but obviously that's something that we also noted. And obviously this institute are encouraged to take advantage of the resources that are coming from DHET in terms of funding, to work on that. The issue of capacity development. We are continuing with the training of staff at the moment. We have a project ongoing now with our partner Saidi, who are also assisting with that. And we noted that some institutes have reverted to that pre-COVID state, and I've noted that some of them is just, a coping mechanism of some sort. But we have seen some or most of the institute that have taken advantage of the progress they made during COVID, and they're actually aiding on that. And we are hoping that by the end of the project, of which we are on the last year of the project, we should be able to strengthen our monitoring and evaluation of this program, and also to advocate and promote the focus on the learning future. So the whole idea of this intervention was to help the institute that not only do we want to now deal with COVID, but how do we as an institute position ourselves for the future of learning, where education is going in the future? So start to develop systems that are going to prepare us for the future. Let it not just be a COVID act, but let it be an act that prepares us for the future of learning as an institute. That is why I think DX become very important, because if you think of digital transformation, it's more an institutional change. It requires all the departments, all the divisions in the institute to be transformed in order to accommodate the digital transformation. Now, in terms of the way forward, colleagues, we are continuing with the current program that we have at the moment. We are having one of our partner institute, Saidi, training 52 participants from all these institutes on digital transformation, but particularly focusing on technology-mediated learning. So majority of the people who are on the current program, they are actually in academic. We have few people who are in ICT in particular, and also other people who are delegated by their own institutes. This program also, the people who are selected, I think we've got about 6 per institute who are selected by the DVC for teaching and learning. And also we are working on establishing an online DX peer learning community, or what you might call community of practice, on our canvas, on our system. So this was initially, actually, as I speak now, the system is developed. It was actually developed for the previous cohort, and we are planning to actually add the current cohort. But the plan, long-term plan, basically, hopefully by the end of the year, is that this particular system or community should be extended to include all the institutes, just to engage on issues that have to do with DX and share information. And it will also involve workshop, and it will be facilitated within USAF. The other thing that we are working on with the current project with Saidi, the project is ending this year. We are hoping by the end of the year, we should have completed the project that we have started on creating a repository that could have all the toolkit that are necessary for DX and policy guide and case studies of the institute. We are looking at some of the institutes that we are working with, and which ones we can also use as case studies that others can learn from on the implementation of DX within HDIs. And also what we are focusing on, I know through the office of our director, Dr. Seal, there are engagement with DHEAD and other funders to try to get funding so that this project can actually be extended, and also we can expand it to include other institutes, because we don't want to assume that only this institute needs support. We believe that we can actually provide more support to the sector as a whole, which we are representing. And the other thing that we have done, and which we continue doing, we have actually started to engage with all the strategic groups within USAF to look at how we can actually integrate all the projects that are happening within USAF that speaks to digital transformation. I am actually involved with one of this project where we map out all the activities that are happening within USAF with regard to DX, in order to make sure that we streamline all the activities that are taking place. And lastly, I'm not particularly involved with this particular engagement, but I know through our director, there are discussions about collaboration with NRF through their digital transformation unit or division. There is a work that they're doing there, but also there has been discussion with Texas International Education Consortium, where they also want to partner with us in terms of DX. So those discussions are ongoing through our director. I'm not actually involved with this particular discussions in particular. I'm just noting them, that there are efforts in order to also collaborate. So colleagues, let me end there. Thank you so much, and my details are there for any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tebogo. Are there any questions apart from what Teboho has just highlighted, including how digital transformation has improved efficiency and also enhanced student experience in terms of student success and other stuff? Any questions? Nontsigelelo, I see your hand is up. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, Teboho. So I'm just keen to know, so for instance, you presented on the profile of these historical disadvantaged institutions. So what I wanted to understand, you did mention that some of the institutions have reverted back to pre-COVID approaches. So is this based on the discomfort expressed by teaching staff and in them, not adopting the digital technologies, or is this an executive issue? So, for instance, if they don't provide the resources that are required, to facilitate a blended learning approach.
Thank you so much. I don't know, Chair, can I take the question, or you want me to take some questions and answer later?
I think it's a conversation. You can go ahead, Teboho.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, Nontsigelelo, look, I mean, from our side, we got a sense we have not done a thorough evaluation to just get a response from the Institute on the reasons behind this particular approach. However, what we got a sense of just from interaction with this institute and people also who are part of our program, it was more a coping mechanism of some sort, as I've said, where obviously this institute were frustrated. And as you could see on the slide that I've shown, majority of them, I mean, by August, they had not returned their student to campus, although most of not necessarily even returning their student, they have not actually started with the academic program. In other words, they had most of the student could not access the information online. They could not conduct any teaching online. So they only relied on the student being back on campus, which happened around August, September, for them to be able to start with their academic activities. So for them, it was actually a coping mechanism to say the only way to survive and redeem the academic progress is for us to, go back to what we used to do. That is why there was that urgency to have all the students back on campus. However, we are planning to do a second round of monitoring this institute and evaluation. And those are some of the things that we will be revisiting just to gain understanding of the approach that they have currently adopted. As you see, we do request them to provide documents. And what we'll be looking at in particular, whether there has been progress in ensuring that digital transformation plans are actually included in their strategy, into their plans, because it's only when these plans are in their strategy when they can be implemented. The minute they're not there, chances are very high there's not going to be any commitment towards them. So we don't want to cast any aspersions of what could have been the reason behind that, but I think it's something that we are going to take effort in order to investigate further. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. If I may, then can I ask a follow-up question? So, I mean, if you're looking at this as a continuum, we know that rural and underserved schools were affected the most. They lost, I mean, I think in one paper they say they lost about 54% of teaching time. So if you're looking at the students then who are entering these institutions with those deficits, what is the impact, on the teaching experience if one is realistic about, the population that they draw their students from?
Yeah, obviously, I mean, you are going to have that particular issue. And if you remember, there was actually an assessment that was done by DHET that particular year. And they had categorized institutes into, there were 3 categories. And one of them was institutes that were in high risk of not completing the academic year. But actually, when you look at the categorization, the category actually was which of the institute will not be able to effectively complete the academic year. In other words, the student will not have benefited much from the teaching that they received. So it was not just about the completion, that even if you complete, will there have been a fair learning that will have taken place to be able to complete that particular those particular programs? And I mean, I remember at that time, and I will leave Britta to just also answer on that. That is an issue that, I mean, on our side, it is difficult to answer, but we know that there has been an effect on the student, but we can't confirm to what extent it has affected the outcome. But we know that institute have put some effort and plans in order to make sure that they complete and make sure that the student receive as enough information as they need to be able to complete the academic programs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Britta, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, thanks, Becky. I just want to come in here. The CHE did a very elaborate, several, in fact, research projects around that time, also to see exactly what is happening in the sector. And it's also related to a project which we called Reimagining Learning and Teaching in the Future After the Pandemic. So that will be launched, that project will be launched, and the research reports from that will be launched in the next few months. So we'll make sure that this list of people also get that project. But Nonsekilelo, we did look at how students were affected, particularly based on reports from all of the universities. So those reports will be in the public space domain within the next month or so. And then you can have a look at it, just to confirm that we did look at it.
Well, thank you very much, Britta. Any other question or comment before we move to the next speaker? Okay, there doesn't seem to be any other question or comment. Thank you. Sorry?
Sorry, Chair, I was noting there's a question, I think, on the chat.
Oh, on the chat, yeah. Sorry.
I'm not sure if is it for me or Britta.
I see Dr. Shirley Lloyd keeps asking if the publics are involved. So in the Relate reports, they were involved,
Okay.
but not many of them actually submitted their reports to DHET. But the ones that were there, we did include in the research. And Laura was actually on that steering group for that project. So the private higher education institutions were involved in that project,
As well.
as they are in all of the CHE projects.
Excellent. Thanks, Britta. William, before we move to the next speaker.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just also following up on the research, how is the data, like what are the gatekeepers in place if one has to conduct research about the findings or the reports or the report that was published about these developments that happened during the COVID-19? Speaking from the access of the data and also protecting, the institutional information if one has to carry out research. Are there any barriers, or is that free for all? Can we just have access to that information?
Becky, I'm assuming that one's for me.
Yes.
Yeah.
So those reports were specific reports that the institution submitted to DHET during COVID, and I think they were similar to the ones that Tebogo just talked about, and on their plans and on what they were doing. And then USAF went in a particular direction, which Tebogo has just explained, and in his presentation, and then the CHE used those reports to really analyze what the institutions were saying. But that was a research project. So the raw data of the reports would not be available in the public space, but the research that was done on it will be in the public space, as I've said, in the next few days. If you wish to do research on any of the CHE data or information that sits with the CHE, you're welcome to contact me. I've put my email in the chat. We do have a research ethics committee, and then we will look at your request depending on what you want to do, and how sensitive the information is. And, with Papaya, and remember, institutions are entities, are individuals. And so with Papaya, we also have to make sure that the institutions have given permission for the information to be used. But as I said right at the beginning, the CHE itself has a research mandate. And by law, all the information that we have on institutions, we may use for research. But we may not necessarily give it to a third party without the institution's permissions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Shaylee, then we move on. I see your hand is up.
Thank you very much. Yeah, just to clarify, or also just for information, and maybe the information that was provided might have not been taken into account. But in 2020 and 2021, we engaged with the DHET and provided extensive information. I think about, I speak under correction, but about 130, 140 private institutions gave information about their readiness to do online teaching and where they were, etc., etc. So there were, and that came through the Association of Private Providers that we then submitted that information. So I'm not sure if that was the same project or program that Dr. Britta is talking about. We also engaged quite robustly and extensively with Mr. Ahmed Issa at a time when he was looking at the whole thing of online, which institutions, private higher eds were engaged in doing what, and we also provided a lot of information there. So I'm not sure where all of that went or if this is a different project, but we're more than happy at any stage to provide extended information should it be required. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Shelley. Let's move on now. Next speaker is it Laura?
Yes, and you did such a great job with my surname. Thank you.
Ah, excellent. Thanks, Laura.
So I'm the third out of 4 speakers, and I thought this would be a great opportunity to ask the over 100 people here a two-part question. We've been hearing the really interesting work being done by national organizations, but I've put a question in the chat, and I think it'd be really, really helpful for national organizations to hear what the over 100 participants here are thinking about. And the question in the chat is, what is your main interest in digital education, and what would you like to see from national organizations? So with your permission, Becky, can people take a couple of minutes to answer that question?
Sure, let's do that.
And if people can answer in the chat, because I don't think we're going to have an opportunity to have everyone speak. Virtual, face-to-face, real-time mode of provision. Interesting. Okay. Broadening accessibility. Okay. And also interesting to hear how you think national organizations can help with that. Competition with everything else on the internet. I wonder what Derek means by that. An approach where digital is not automatically seen as a panacea. Okay. Okay, so Gloria is not keen on the digital being the savior. Okay. Learning design. Learning design. Okay. Listening to people on the ground. Well, this is one of the ways of trying to do that. Online delivery. Okay. The internet is a massive distraction. Okay, so using the digital at all means that people actually get distracted. Okay. I think that probably goes back to learning design. It's not always achievable. Thank you. Other people? What's your main interest in digital infrastructure and policies that prioritize accessibility, inclusivity, and quality? Yes. Clarity on the new size and shape? Yes. And our national dependency on cellular telephony, that's a huge challenge. That has come up in a number of other contexts. Thank you. I think we've got time for a few more people. And in fact, even once I start talking, please do continue to put things in the chat, because this is really, really helpful for priority setting. Breaking down barriers, 20th century needs, learning management system to their full capacity. Okay, I'm going to start talking, but I think it'd be really great if you can add more priorities in the chat. And then if you can think about what you would like to see national organizations doing, because national organizations obviously work across the sector. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the USAF's, the University of South Africa's Teaching and Learning Strategy Group's Digital Education Community of Practice. So that's a long, a long introduction. So you know, USAF is the umbrella body for the 26 universities in the country. And as you heard earlier, there's a number of strategy groups, and teaching and learning is one of them. So a while back, the strategy group identified the need for a digital education community of practice, but was very mindful that there is already quite a lot happening in terms of supporting academics and students in terms of digital education. So the first thing I was asked to do was look at what existing support there is. And I found that there's a number of formal programs in educational technology and related issues at UCT, WITS, and UJ. There are the kind of national initiatives we're hearing about today. There are some other initiatives like Emerge, Up to You, and so on. These are more informal or smaller groupings. And there are also some short courses. So, for example, Stellenbosch runs an edX course on AI in higher education. Then I sent out a survey to all the teaching and learning centers, for which USAF has a mailing list. Every university now has a teaching and learning structure. And I had 18 replies where people spoke about what they think is needed. And there was consensus amongst the 18 replies that there is the need to have some kind of a community of practice. And here people said they want to share experiences, they want to share resources, people want to develop resources together. People also spoke about finding speakers who could be of interest to the whole sector. And the one issue that has come up that I'll talk to again is influencing relevant policies. So I think some of the kinds of discussions with Britta earlier. And while there was consensus that there's a need for some kind of formal community of practice through USAF, there was a strong affirmation and emphasis that there should be no duplication of efforts. So on that basis, the USAF strategy group developed terms of reference for the community of practice, which I will put into the chat. And they really picked up on the earlier discussions around facilitating linkages, coordination, sharing of resources and activities, collaboration, facilitation also of scholarly projects, developing joint proposals for the sector, and influencing policy. And a number of people were nominated. People were not nominated to represent their institutions. They were nominated on the basis of their work in this area, although there is a limit of 2 people from each institution. And I think some of the people on this COP are here today. Fezile Mlungu, Gerrit Wissing, Jackie Batchelor, Nazira Hussein. I won't go through them all, but we can certainly share who they are. And it's also possible to co-opt people onto the COP. So the first meeting was held at the beginning of the month. And once again, there was an emphasis about not duplicating efforts, especially considering the need where there is so much to be done. And one of the issues that came up was something that was mentioned earlier. People feel very strongly that the 0 rating, especially for learning management systems, that was organized and mandated during the COVID lockdown period, needs to be reinstated. The feeling is that access is still a real problem, and that for many students, connectivity through data is a barrier. So that's something that's being taken very clearly. And then the other issue that came up was the issue of the cost of AI tools, where this is not evenly spread through the sector. So this is something that the sector can deal with as a sector. At the first meeting, it was agreed that 3 activities were agreed on to kickstart the activities. The first is this event, because there was a sense that people don't actually know what the national organizations are doing. And this is the beginning of a conversation. So this question around what would you like to see national organizations doing is really important. And I do encourage you to contact any of us in the national organizations to let us know what you think these strategy groups and these structures should be doing. Then there was a feeling that the kind of thinking around AI that is predominant in a lot of the journals, newspapers, think pieces, and so on is not reflecting a global South perspective. And so a group of people in the COP are writing a set of think pieces about AI in higher education, and the conversation has expressed interest in publishing these. So hopefully you'll be seeing these in the next while. And then the third thing was a sharing of resources. And the idea here, and I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to give you a link, just bearing in mind that this is very, very preliminary. The idea is that a digital education bibliography is put together. So let me put the link in the chat, and then also share my screen to talk to you here. Okay, so please bear in mind this is very, very preliminary. This is just to kickstart the let me work out how to do this. Sorry, this is a Zoom, and of course we all work in other. Okay, here we are. Okay, can you all see the bibliography on my screen? And one person just tell me.
Now coming.
It's coming.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
It says it has started.
Okay. Okay, I can see that some people are already there. So I don't know why it's taking so long to load. It says your screen share is loading. Okay, I think I'll just carry on talking while it's loading, and the rest of you can just have a look at the link that I've shared with you.
It's there now.
It's there now, great. Okay, so the thinking here is that a number of universities, and I've just heard mention from our previous speakers, are already developing resources, and that these are context specific. Our main concern really is that the kinds of resources that are coming from elsewhere, from the global north and so on, don't really understand our context. And of course, our context is not at all homogeneous, but that it would be really useful to start with sharing the resources that already exist, that are already being produced by local universities. And this is a kickstart. It's just very much early days, but there are 3 parts to this bibliography. So the first is South African produced resources. And here, I have sent out a email to all those centers for teaching and learning, and about, I think, out of the 26 universities, about 8 have replied to me. It's interesting. A lot of people say there are resources, but they in learning management systems, people are happy to share them, but they're not necessarily in a shareable form. So I think my sense is there is a willingness to share, and I'm hoping that by showing you the value of this, more people will share with us. My responsibility is to get this going, and the idea is that it will be a living document. So as you can see, just to show you some of what exists here, we've got stuff on, got a chapter on UDL. These are all links you can go through straight away. UJ has done a video on artificial intelligence. UCT's got a series on artificial intelligence. There's quite a few of those. There's equity and online. There's a classic manual on facilitating online, which was published in 2009, which is still being used for facilitating online courses. And it's available open access. It's been adapted. It can still be adapted. UJ, for example, has got a video on how to submit a program for accreditation. Now, presumably, I didn't watch the whole thing, that is through the UJ system, but there will be standard procedures that are true for everyone and might be useful for everyone. There's more on UDL, there's learning design, and so on. So there's a lot that is being produced locally. Then what I've also started doing is identifying resources that are from elsewhere that would be useful locally. So, for example, the Association of African Universities has developed something on artificial intelligence for Africa, bearing it in mind. There's stuff on prompts. There's stuff on ICT plans and policies, which many people are in the middle of writing at the moment. And there are a number of collections of resources. And what I've been trying to do here is just put a short comment. Some of the resources are from elsewhere. They've got a strong global north focus, but a number of them are very, very practical and will certainly be useful to South African contexts. There's a project that was done way before COVID on blended learning, and I know some people are still using some of those resources, so that's there. Emerge Africa has done over 200 webinars, so people have access to those links. There's a book on learning design with a strong marginal periphery perspective, a number of South African authors. That's also open access, etc. So the idea is that people add to and use these resources. They need to be a link. At the moment, USAF doesn't have a repository or a place for the actual documents, so it's got to be through a link. Of course, there's a lot more. You could do this. You could make a website. You could do a lot of things. This is how to share what's available very simply. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing, because this is really just to show you what's possible. And I have shared the link. Somebody in the chat's asked for it, so I'll just share it again. And I think that's really all I want to say at this point. That this community of practice has just begun. It's really a month old. That the sense from that we really want to know from everyone here what your appetite for this is. I'm interested to know how useful this would be, and I'm particularly interested in having resources shared with us. So I think that's all I'm going to say in the first instance, and open it up for discussion.
Thank you very much, Laura. Any questions for Laura? Regarding common practices. Any comments or point for discussion in moving things forward? Yes, Tato?
Thank you. Greetings to the sitting and a good morning. With regards to the discussion on the research and the AI, I think it is important for Universitas 21, I mean, all the universities to adopt a common frame with regards to artificial intelligence and research for digital transformation and inclusion as part of a benchmarking and best practice for operation for excellence, because this is will aid in transformational solution in advancing innovative solution for universities in order to be able to meet with the quality standards and assurance that the Council for Higher Education has set for universities to adhere to, and will also aid in advancing science and technology for research purposes and output with regards to teaching and learning. So this is of paramount importance that this discussion is taking place so that we are able to look at the nitty-gritty, so that we are able to adjust the methods of approach so that we have a multidisciplinary approach that comprises of traditional and modern approaches that will aid the teaching and learning support for staff, students, and overall the higher education system within the nation. So this is of importance that we look at best practices that are suitable for the environment that we are in, so that we are able to reach that superior quality higher education standard for universities and align the common interest in order to advance those pedagogy methods that will aid those benchmarking for quality assessment and also attaining superior quality outcome for research. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chacha. That's a very good comment. Maureen?
Yeah,
Go
thanks
ahead.
so much. Laura, I don't know whether you had opportunity in the chat to look through what people said they wanted from the national organizations, but there was a lot there, and of course, many people had very important things to say. And just before that, we had 2 presentations from the national organizations. So I would just wonder, at a glance, whether you think, or how you see the match between what people said in the chat that they wanted from the national organizations and what the national organizations say they're doing. How does the alignment look between what is being asked for and what is actually being done? Is there any way that you can assess that? Or even, perhaps any of the speakers who presented from the national associations could perhaps also say something if they like. Thank you.
I think what we can do is,
yeah, thanks, Becky.
Maybe it's to let everyone finish, then we discuss after that. Looking at whatever each sort of like education institution has covered. Then Laura, meanwhile, will look at the comments, and then after the last speaker, then we have a discussion. Will that work like that?
Thank you, Becky. And then we will also have a chance to look at the comments.
Yes, yeah. I think that's fair. Yeah. Okay. But that's a very good point, Maureen. I think it helps as well. Okay. Any other comments? I think there is none. Yeah, there is none. Okay, the next speaker is Nicola Palit. Is Nicola here?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, Nicola. Thank you very much. Shoot.
Okay, so now that you can see I'm human, I'm going to mute my video just so that we can conserve some bandwidth. Generally a good practice. Someone can mute the mic. Maybe the host can help me with that. Wonderful, thanks. All right, so I'm here to represent HELTASA today, the Higher Education Learning and Teaching Association of Southern Africa, which is a non-profit professional association for educators and other significant role players in the tertiary sector in Southern Africa. So it aims to promote transformation and quality in higher education learning and teaching practices. While the majority of the current members are South African, we have members that are from other Southern African countries, such as Eswatini, but we even have members from abroad, such as the US. Our members work in public and private higher education institutions, and at the institutional level, within and across institutions, HELTASA seeks to promote professional networking between staff in central units responsible for enhancing educational quality and faculty-based academic development, faculty-based academic staff who have a scholarly interest in learning and teaching. So some of you might know about SOTL, Scholarship of Teaching and Learning. And HELTASA seeks to extend this network through linking up with and promoting the establishment of professional networks. It supports the professionalization of higher education practitioners in Southern Africa in various areas, from policy matters, learning, teaching, and professional learning practices, and educational research. Now, HELTASA also seeks to work collaboratively with policymakers, statutory bodies, and other professional associations that have an interest in higher education. And these groups are seen as strategic partners, as we have a shared interest in higher education. HELTASA's main forum is an annual event hosted by a different South African university each year. It also has project teams that provide further opportunities for constructive engagement and collaboration throughout the year. And these really seek to push the boundaries for equitable participatory approaches. And the project teams used varied dialogical formats, from online reading groups to workshops to panel discussions or digital dialogues. And based on the 3R principles, relevance, responsiveness, and resilience, our core values include collaboration, collegiality, professionalism, social justice, equity, criticality, and innovation. So this is the HELTASA governance structure. I'm just going to tell you a little bit. But basically, we have 4 layers. There's an advisory board, a coordinating council, project teams, and members. And there is a project lead for each of the strategic and scholarly project teams. And this person also sits on the coordinating council, which is the strategy and decision-making level. And the digital learning and teaching project team is one of the focus areas of HELTASA. And this team seeks to enhance the quality of learning and teaching in online, blended, and hybrid modes by supporting the professional learning and development of higher education practitioners who support others to design inclusive, contextually responsive teaching, learning, and assessment activities for technology-integrated online, blended, and hybrid contexts. And we hope to achieve this by enabling professional networking, fostering cross-institutional dialogues, modeling and sharing contextually relevant practices from various academic settings, and designing and offering professional development opportunities. So I'm the project lead for the Digital Learning and Teaching project team, and I also serve on the coordinating council, where we have various conversations that enable the coordination of our communications and activities across the team. But in sum, we all work together to offer our members a buffet of professional learning and networking opportunities across these focused areas. And as the focus of this session today is on digital education, I was asked to represent HELTASA and share what we've been doing and how we've been thinking about this. So prior to the pandemic, there was a technology-enhanced learning special interest group, and this mainly comprised of people doing educational technology-related work to support lecturers in various universities. And it was led by myself and Alana Riley from University of Fort Hare, essentially for people like us. But now what we see is that there's a lot of overlap in interest between the teams. There is a definite interest in the digital from many perspectives, be it decolonization, curriculum, and yeah, there's also been very much a growth in interest from people who are academics and looking to engage in educational technology from a scholarly perspective as well. So HALTASA underwent quite a bit of restructuring and shape-shifting in 2021 to become more responsive and relevant, especially during and after the pandemic. And I think we do have to understand some of the history of where this community was traditionally compared to where it is now. So traditionally, it was made up of academic developers, and their agenda was to build legitimacy for the field of academic development. Later on, some lecturers with an interest in scholarly teaching and learning joined, and there were some digital-related topics at the annual conferences, but these tended to be uncritical and show and tell. And I don't want to say that this is bad. I did the style of presentation myself at the time, and it is part, as did many other colleagues, and it's part of the evolution of the field in South Africa. Then the pandemic hit, and in 2020, so CUT hosted the first HALTASA online conference, and then in 2021, HALTASA hosted its first online unconference, and then in 2022, a second unconference called HALTASA Fest. Then in 2023, the Northwest University used a hybrid approach to host the unconference, and the online festival and unconference format was seen as being responsive to the need for more inclusive engagements than traditional academic conferences. So in the early days of the pandemic, some of you will remember, many of us attended these terribly designed, transmissive education or academic conferences online, and there was a desire for something different. The growth of the organization and together with this expanding and shifting role, particularly with how the pandemic had affected higher education, necessitated repurposing and restructuring the governing structure and governance mechanism to ensure efficiency and sustainability. Its new mandate was to be relevant, responsive, and resilient professional entity committed to strengthening higher education practice, research, and policy. So in summary, the association is reinventing itself by using the online space to show others it was relevant and resilient in times of crisis. However, we're also modeling different approaches to online conversations, showing that there is an alternative to the teacher-centeredness many of us are working against that we see being replicated online. So we aim to model more member-centered approaches, digital dialogues that enable valuing diverse voices and positionalities, disrupting traditional power relations that were associated with association and academic conferences in the early days, where expert voices were dominant. So the digital became a strategy to disrupt and be responsive to the kinds of things we were observing in the higher education sector around us. And yes, we have the digital learning and teaching project team, but as I mentioned, all the project teams use online spaces and facilitation in various ways. And we have conversations about aspects of digital education using various digital tools. And the digital has, as I mentioned, become an evolving cross-team interest. And the pandemic also showed us that the range of people who had an interest in sharing or developing their knowledge in this area was growing. It's no longer just for the EdTech people. As part of the community, we have lecturers or AD practitioners who may be just as interested in educational technology or digital education-related conversations as other areas, whether it be student learning, program or curriculum development, or decolonization. So there was a realization, I think also by the exec in 2020, as was during the pandemic, that they were not able to complete the mandates due to the voluntary nature of the work and that the institutional work during the pandemic had many academic development practitioners and academics in a flurry with very little time. And the success of the first online conference in 2020 was the catalyst in realizing that with expanded capacity, we can be more responsive and relevant to the needs of our members, especially during the crisis that needed the more diverse higher education community, nationally and internationally, to be sharing contextually valued practices. We opened a space on the website, and there were short pieces of scholarship where we garnered local and global responses, as well as responses from school educator teaching with technology, school educators. So these successes through the affordances of technology motivated the restructuring, and I think contributed to who we are today as an association. The short scholarly pieces of scholarly pieces actually continued. So here you see, often we have key takeaways following online events. And these show, summarize highlights. And I think for any organization looking for insights into digital education across universities, these takeaway pieces say a lot about what is happening in South African universities in particular at various times, how people are thinking about things like AI and online assessment. Also to mention that the journal Critical Studies in Teaching and Learning, Crystal, is publishing a special issue focused on HALTAS's on-conferences, and it will be available soon. And this forthcoming scholarship also shows how members of the association are thinking about the role of technology. There are also a lot of resources on the current HALTASA website, but there will be a new website soon that will include more resources, and you can become a HALTASA member to receive regular newsletters, or you can just look at our news page for upcoming events. The digital dialogues are open to anybody, but you need to become a member to receive the annual newsletters. Yeah, and then something else that we piloted was a coaching series, and this was the digital learning and teaching team, where we had people from 4 different institutions, and we took them through planning and designing engaging workshops. Some people worked with tutors, others worked with lecturers. So it was quite a diverse group, but it was essentially to support digital learning and teaching in their institutions. Just to mention the upcoming unconference, it's going to be hosted by the University of Limpopo and University of Venda. And so that's something that is coming up next. The institute, the association will also be applying for a UCDG grant to expand the work of some of its project teams. And one of these is a fellowship program to support critical educational technology practice and research. The different teams have a range of digital dialogues in the works, such as AI in the curriculum that's being planned for mid-June. And we hope to continue to grow our membership and to continue offering more responsive and relevant offerings in a range of online formats. So this is just one of the resource pages that's going to be updated, and on our news page, you can see, if you're not a HALTASA member, you can see what events are coming up. And I think opportunities for collaboration, we see from the signups for today's event that when we work together, we can achieve critical mass and reach more people. And we should work together to market online events. And hopefully after today, we can find some shared goals and work together towards achieving these. There is, I think, a very big need to curate online events, conference calls for publications, resources, and scholarly think pieces in a central space. Yeah, I see there's some questions in the chat, but hopefully I'm open to sharing, answering any questions you might have about HALTASA or the digital learning and teaching team or other various activities. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, Nico. Any questions? That's a very good presentation as well. Yeah, you've highlighted quite a number of points, and some they sort of like relate to the other presentations as well. So any questions or comments or suggestions? Okay, there doesn't seem to be any questions or comments, but as Maureen raised a good point just before this presentation, that probably having gone through the comments from the participants, how are their concerns addressed or issues that they've raised by the different 4 educational organizations? I think that we can start having that discussion. Although I'm not too sure as to how we're going to lump those chats in terms of or categorize them to say, for example, most people asked, we're focusing on digital literacy, for example. How are the organizations dealing with that? Some were talking about infrastructure. How are the organizations dealing with that as well, and so on. So I think it should be important for us to have an idea as to how we are able to address that. Laura?
First of all, I think 3 things. The first thing is there's clearly needs to be more coordination between the HELTASA, the CHE, and USAF, which is really helpful. And I think that this is part of that happening. The second thing is there is clearly quite a lot going on that people don't know about. So there's more to be done around communication. And then the third thing, I think Maureen is suggesting that there's a misalignment between what's needed and what's being done. And I think that relates back to an earlier comment. I couldn't find it, but somebody was talking about the fact that so many of these activities are based on funding, and they funded projects. And this is one of the problems that we face as a sector, that so much of what higher education is doing is underfunded. And the fact that so many of these responses are donor funded does make it problematic to come up with a consistent program. And I don't know the solution to that. I'm sure that this is something people are aware of. I hope that after this event, there will be a closer look at where the gaps are. There are opportunities for raising funds. It's certainly, I know that USAF's already been working on a funded project proposal around AI and higher education for the sector. So I hope that this is part of that engagement. So thank you for the question. I wish I could have more solutions.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Any other comments or
Britta might have
question?
something to say from the CHE's point of view.
Yeah, CHE.
People always think the CHE has money, but we don't. We're actually more underfunded even than the universities. So in terms of the themes which came out, I think the first one is there's a lot of questions around artificial intelligence. Then how digital education will look at access and the digital divide. And that's a very important transformational issue that we should not lose sight of. Then another theme was support and capacity building. Now that the CHE will be doing a lot of as we go forward. As I said in the chat, once this HEPS is in a more final form, it's in a draft form, we will have an extensive capacity building exercise throughout nationally. And just to link with Tebogo's presentation on the HDIs, I actually got funding from INQUAHE, which is the International Quality Assurance Agencies network, do in-person workshops with some of the HDIs. So yeah, it is always funding based, and we have to get grants for things, which is a pity. But we will be doing quite a lot of capacity development around the standard, particularly. Just to comment on something else, somebody asked if the regulators or the policies are related to the sort of scholarly approach by HALTASA. Most of the CHE's work is informed by research. We do try to infuse as much of a scholarly approach and existing research and knowledge and so on into what we do. So those relate reports that I spoke about, yeah, like Nicola says, I'm a regular at HALTASA, not just as an attendee, but they often invite me as well. So I think that's you know, we do work together. And I think quite a few people, you know, and also as you've now seen, working together with USAF in this community of practice. The DHET-funded UCDG projects, the work I do with the standards is already a UCDG project. Then there's another project which is related, it's also funded by the UCDG. It's the National Coordinating Committee for what's it called, Laura? Something with the framework, or for implementing the framework for academics as university teachers. And there's a whole section in that project with funding on digital education. But that project there are parts of it that hasn't come off the ground and has suffered a little bit. So maybe that's one of the things we can do, is to look how we can harness that project again and the funding in that project for this. Thank you, colleagues. I actually have to go, but we had prepared some feedback questions, Becky, for the group on the Mentimeter. So I was wondering if I could quickly flight those. So you can quickly get out your cell phones, your smartphones. If I may, Becky, can I proceed?
Sure, go ahead, Bridget.
Thanks. I'm going to share my screen. It's in Mentimeter, and it is. Can you see that?
Not yet. On my side.
Share. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, so those of you who've not worked with Mentimeter before, you can either type in the code you can go to menti.com and then type in that code 47185433 and go to the questions, or you can just use your smartphone with a QR code and just respond to the questions. So I'll just allow a little bit of time. And on this question, you've got two options. I was kind of assuming that the people in this webinar would be digitally literate. So so for the folks who said not as useful as expected, there will be follow-up questions. So the way you can give some input.
Yeah, we're still short. I think the response rate is still below 50%. What, 79?
Yeah, I'll wait till it's 40 maybe.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's going up. Yeah. 51.
Okay, it seems to have slowed down, so I'm just going to go to the next question. I always forget where to click. This is an open-ended one where you can suggest topics for future webinars, or if you see some already there, you can vote for them as well. Can the person who said digital qualification framework just mention what they mean by that? I'm not sure what that means. Okay, there's quite a lot for Laura to work with here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to move on to the next question. Means of communication or interaction. Is it webinars? Is it a newsletter? Is it, I don't know. Okay, there seems to be overwhelming workshops. So Laura, I think more regular conversations, I think, is what people are asking for. And then I'm sorry, colleagues, if I'm rushing a bit. I've got a flight to catch. So I'm going to move to the last one that we have. You can give up to 3 words it'll create a word cloud. Just your reflections on this morning. Becky, I think whilst people are finishing that, maybe you can close. I'm not sure if people can continue working on this.
That's fine. Well, they're cracking their heads on this one. I think I'd like to thank the organizers of this webinar. They know who they are. I think it's a good start. I think it's something that we always see its importance, but we never take action and sort of like start working on it. So from the talks, I did pick up some key points that highlights the importance of digital education, especially in South Africa. One of them was accessibility, cost effectiveness, flexibility, quality of education, skills development, and teacher training. One thing that I would have loved, obviously, is the initiatives that are sort of like South Africa, we sort of like focusing on things like digital game-based learning analytics. I think we did touch on that, and e-learning platforms, or even MOOCs, which are very important. I think it's something that most developing countries have sort of like benefited from, or they've implemented as well. We did sort of like pick up challenges in relation to sort of like associated with digital education. A key was infrastructure, whereby there's limited internet access, and poor infrastructure can hinder the adoption of digital education. Another one was the digital divide. I think we can't overemphasize that one, whereby the not-haves and the haves, which is always going to be a problem, especially in our rural kind of like universities or rural communities, or students who come from rural communities to our universities. The other one was content. The availability of and quality of digital education content is always limited. I think that's what we're talking about now, that it's high time that the content is made available so that it can make life easier for students and provide them with relevant and engaging learning materials. Another one, teacher training. Obviously, teachers may require training effectively to integrate technologies. So it's very important that we always keep that. It's a challenge currently in South Africa. It's something that we can start looking at. But overall, digital education has a potential to transform our education landscape in South Africa by providing access to quality education, skills development opportunities. However, I already say that it's essential to address these challenges associated with digital education and ensure that it's implemented in the way that's equitable, inclusive, and effective. I thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you,
very much.
everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Becky.
Thanks, Laura.
Bye.
Jen.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Becky.
Good job, Becky.
Thank you. Bye-bye.